Hello and welcome. I'm glad you could be with us tonight. We have a topic that I think is going to be universally interesting to all of you. We're going to be talking about conflict and about the importance of conflict and some about conflict resolution. And with me is a mediator. Janet Rowles is with me. She is a mediator in public schools, in private practice. She works with couples going through divorce or post-divorce. She works with families who are just having other than divorce kind of issues,
Absolutely.
correct? And she also works, and this sounded intriguing to me, with nonprofit boards who might be having trouble making decisions, and with corporation boards, I'm guessing.
Sure.
And for those who may be sitting at home and saying, well, I think I could define mediation, but I'm not positive. How do you, just in a nutshell, explain what mediation is?
Mediation is really just people coming together, sitting down at a table with a neutral third party and having a difficult discussion about something that they're probably upset about. It's really an alternative than from going to court, where like a judge is going to decide for you. So the core value is really self-determination, where people can decide for themselves and make choices for themselves.
So at the end of mediation, the two parties involved make the decisions about whatever they're dealing with. The mediator doesn't say, this is my advice, this is what you should consider.
Exactly.
Okay.
It is our job to support them throughout the process in self-determination, not even just at the end. So the whole process should be their process, their dialogue, and we are there to support them.
If a couple, I'm thinking in the divorce arena now, has a complicated financial kind of situation, can a mediator deal with that too, or is that when you need to go to the attorney route?
I would say that mediators should be experts in the conflict, and they may have other expertise, but it's really their job to wear the conflict hat in a mediation. And so there's lots of other experts to go and consult. So you might want legal advice, you might want tax advice, you might want real estate advice. So there's lots of people that people should consult and get the information that they need. But the mediator really is there to support the process.
So you could have a complicated financial family situation and go to a mediator. It doesn't mean...
It doesn't mean they shouldn't get other help.
Correct, I understand.
Yeah.
Are there some limitations with mediation?
There are differing opinions about that. I am pretty game to work with anybody. And in fact, I specialize in high conflict and sort of emotional situations. So I will talk to just about anybody, and I will help anybody. Some people believe that if there is a power differential, then maybe that's not a great place for mediation, because it's not that easy to balance the table, unless there's attorneys in the room or something. So that can be an issue for some people.
Out of Janet's work, she's written a book, and I wanted to mention this early on. It's called The Tell Me More Gesture, and we're going to talk a lot about some of the most interesting ideas, I thought, from the book. But first, I want to just mention that you have your master's in human development, and you have a certificate in dispute resolution from the Hamlin School of Law. And a very exciting detail in her history, she won, or was awarded, I guess winning isn't the right word, the Peacemaker of the Year award from the Minneapolis Public Schools just a few years ago. And I thought, what a lovely award.
Thank you.
It sounded great.
Thank you.
And that's because you also go into schools, right, Janet?
Right, and in schools, I have done what's called circle work. It's a restorative process where you bring people together and sit in a circle and learn how to have a difficult discussion, really. It's just in a circle with a group.
And you said to me earlier that that comes out of the Native American tradition.
Restorative practices generally come from the Native people. who bring the community together. When somebody's done a harm to somebody else, they bring the whole community in, and they welcome the perpetrator as a whole person. So their bad behavior doesn't become the whole person. So it becomes a safe place to have really difficult and deep discussions. They still have some outcomes from it. They don't gloss over things at all. But it's a much deeper and more, more complete, more wholesome process.
That sounds very healthy. Well, in your book, you start out right at the get-go saying conflict is good. We shouldn't run away from it. We can get closer to people via conflict. And I'm sure that some people, when they hear that in your workshops or in mediation, go, oh, I don't know about that. Tell us why it's good.
Okay, well, that is sort of the thing that you do when somebody's coming at you or they're upset at you. That's sort of the first impulse. Conflict is good because it's ever present. We can't get around it. And so we might as well accept it, first of all. And we can see it from the positive point of view that it actually deepens our relationship with somebody. So the process of going through it is deepening, and also just getting to know another person and how they are way deep down, or how they are when things are difficult, or how they are when they're upset. And we also find out a lot about our own selves and deepening our own selves.
But if it doesn't go well, then you don't necessarily get closer to someone. I mean, conflict has to have
it's an opportunity.
Some resolution.
Right.
It's
an opportunity.
Maybe a key
Whether
word.
you take it or not is another thing.
Okay, that's a key thing here, isn't it? When you decided to write the book, the title of the book is very telling, but tell us kind of why you decided to write the book.
Okay.
And why you chose the title as you did.
Okay. So I decided to write the book because as a mediator, I really found that I had a gift for being with people who are really upset with each other. But as a person in the world, I can be very emotional and very, I can lash out or I can get upset.
Very difficult?
I can be difficult. I can be an instigator. Okay. I call myself a mediator/instigator. I wrote the book because I did this work for myself. And I found that there was a lot that I could apply from my mediator skills to my personal skills. I started doing workshops about it, and from the workshops really came the book. So you asked about the title. The title is The Tell Me More Gesture, How and Why to Welcome Conflict. And the title is representative of the model. It's about leaning into conflict. It's about welcoming it in a way that the person can feel actually welcome to say more. And
so one of your key ideas is to ask the two people when they're in conflict, one will say to the other, tell me more, in a very open, non-judgmental way, right?
Right. So I'm recommending that people somebody needs to choose to be the listener. And I mean real listening, not the kind of pretend to listening that we normally do. And real listening means giving somebody else the feeling of getting listened to. So no longer am I just taking information, I'm actually giving something back. I'm giving recognition and saying, tell me more, and meaning it in a way that they can feel it.
And the meaning it is very important, isn't it? And even in her book, or not even, but in her book, she talked about practicing saying, tell me more, in a way that it became more natural. Is that right?
I actually have people go in front of the mirror and say to themselves, tell me more, as many times as it takes until they believe it. And I learned to do this because in workshops, I didn't realize it was so hard, but in workshops, people had difficulty just getting over that hump. So first thing I do is have people practice saying it out loud.
And I mean, we do know with most things in life, practice really helps. It makes us more comfortable, more expert. I was very intrigued in the book how you described what happens when people are upset. And we go into a more childish part of ourselves often, or less mature, less caring, less empathetic. Tell us some of the other descriptions that you use for
I don't say childish because adults get upset too. And I think I want to normalize conflict and think adults, it's also an adult thing to do. But conflict is really universal. And when we're in conflict, when we're upset, we're feeling relatively weak and relatively self-absorbed compared to our normal self. So I'm more concerned about me suddenly than I normally am. And when people get listened to, when people feel listened to, they calm down. And when people calm down, they suddenly feel stronger. And when they feel stronger, they can make better decisions on their own behalf. And they can take the perspective of somebody else.
So if they're not listened to, though, and if the person is jumping in and trying to defend or persuade or share facts, the other person continues on being not understood, feeling.
Right. You're still in a negative cycle of conflict. And the trick is to try to move towards a positive cycle of interacting as opposed to this negative cycle.
And it's not an easy thing to do, is it?
It isn't.
At least it seems to me like it's a big challenge.
It is. You're really deciding that, you're realizing that when someone's upset, they're going to act upset. And instead of expecting someone to be calm and rational and kind, we're expecting them to be upset. And for some reason, we think that someone upset is going to be respectful to us, and often they aren't. And if we can expect it, then we aren't surprised, and then we can lean forward and say, tell me more.
And yeah, that's a key thing too, isn't it? If you don't, if you don't know that the person, if you're in conflict with, is going to get into a more challenging kind of position, you can be more upset with their behavior, right?
When you get surprised, absolutely. And I tell people, nobody just does this from the very beginning. You have to first of all find the impulse. You have to remember, oh right, I was going to say, tell me more. And then as soon as you realize it, you just start it. So you might react by going, I never said that, or that hurts, and then all of a sudden you go, oh right, I was going to do that thing. And then you go, okay, hang on, tell me more. And you can just switch gears right in the middle.
So it's practice, it's redoing it and trying again and all of that. You've got a couple other safety net phrases, as you call them. Tell us about those. So
what I'm teaching people to do in the book is make reflections in a way that the other person can feel. But we don't always feel very eloquent when we're being attacked. And so it's nice to have these safety net phrases to fall back on. So one is tell me more, or you could say, is there more? Another one is to say, you've had it. And you just go there with them. And I have people go, yes. Like you can just feel the wind sort of come out of them. So you've had it is another one. And another one that you can say is, this is really hard, but I'm going to keep trying. And the reason that I have that one in there is that because we get emotional. If we're feeling attacked or blamed, we, as listeners, can feel sad or feel angry, or you can sort of see it as on my face. And so I'm going to be transparent and say, this is hard, but I'm going to keep trying. And so I'm recognizing it, but I'm throwing it back to you. So I'm not trying to take the limelight. I'm still trying to acknowledge where I'm at and be transparent, but then say, please do tell me more.
And as the mediator, if you're with two people who are going through this, are you pretty much just an observer?
No, I am the one that's doing the reflecting in that case. When they're really upset, when people are really upset, I am leaning forward with them. When they're just having a pretty good conversation, I'm leaning back and less involved.
Okay, that makes sense. In terms of the listening, I want to talk a little bit more about it too, because there are lots of things I think we all think are important in listening. But you describe listening in a more complicated and interesting way, really, than I had thought about much. So tell us a little bit more about how hard it is to listen well.
Well, when we're listening during a conflict, so I am a party to this conflict. So it's not hard for me as a mediator, but when I'm a party to the conflict, then that's more difficult. And what happens is we are getting upset at the same time. We might be getting triggered, and we have to manage our own difficulties and our own faults. We're human. So this is not about being perfect at it. This is a very fluid process, and I might suddenly blow it. I'm not a robot. I might say, what are you talking about? And then get upset, right? But then I go, oh, right, that isn't how I wanted to be. I want to listen and go, I'm sorry, I just want to listen. I interrupted, please keep going. So it's a very dynamic process.
And it's really, as you describe it, letting the person keep talking longer than maybe one's original intent would be, or comfort level even.
Yep. So
Correct?
I say there's 3 parts to the gesture. First of all is giving someone the feeling of getting listened to. That's in your reflecting and how you are, just how you are in the room, not just your words, but how you are. The second part is doing it until they're all the way done. And so I often say to people, when was the last time you got listened to until you were all the way done? I can't even say it without tearing up in a way, because it's
rare,
rare.
I bet.
Very rare. And of course, it's not always possible to do that, but that's the gesture still, that you're going to listen to them longer than you would normally. And then when they're done, you ideally leave a little time for silence. And the reason behind that is, and you can just say, hang on a second, I'm just going to think for a few minutes before I start. I realize it's sort of my turn. Or let's take a break. I'd like to think about what you've said. And what that does is it really deepens what they've said. They feel very honored, I think, by your wanting to do that. And you have a chance to regroup. So you can take in what was said. You haven't been, according to my directions, hopefully, you haven't been sort of in your mind going, okay, I'm going to say this and say this, right?
And
so this gives you time to decide what you want to say. So I like to say that the gesture, leaning forward and saying, tell me more, that whole gesture is like leaving your heart open to the person. And when you leave that little bit of silence afterwards, it's like just leaving it open just a little longer.
And that would take practice too, because we're not so comfortable in our society with silences.
Right. Right, but we can name it. I'm a fan of transparency, so it's fine to just say, I need a break. I'm having feelings, or I want to consider this more.
I'm confused.
I need some time because I haven't even been thinking about what I want to say.
The honesty would be refreshing and important.
Right.
And taking a longer break is okay too, right,
Absolutely.
Janet? I want to, leave and come back in an hour or 20 minutes. Or
I've had couples in where one person spent the whole time being the listener and the other the speaker. And they know that they're practicing this gesture. So somebody gets heard for an hour and a half, not in silence, with somebody really giving them the feeling of getting listened to. And then at the end, they know that that's it, and they might not come back for a week or two, or they might go discuss it on their own, but it can take a while.
So breaks can vary.
Right.
You had several statements in the book, and we only have about 8 minutes left, but I want to just throw out a few and just get a real quick, short explanation from you. One is facts don't matter. Right. That would upset a lot of people.
That's hard on some people.
Why do you say that?
I say that because when you're in a conflict situation and you are doing the gesture, you are not judging. And so if you're not judging somebody, you aren't even judging with whether what they're saying is true or false. You're letting them have their own truth in that moment, and maybe it's going to change in the next moment. And that's why facts don't matter.
Interesting. Fixing the problem can be demeaning. Right. Tell us why.
Fixing the problem, again, when someone's in conflict, maybe even otherwise in normal life, but trying to fix it in the middle of somebody being upset is actually a way of shutting them down. And you're also making an assumption that they can't fix it themselves.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I tend to come up with solutions for friends, and I realize now, thinking about this, that that's not such a good thing.
Well, it may not be.
Right. Go to the heat.
That's my favorite.
Oh, good. Tell us what that means.
Go to the heat means when you're reflecting back to somebody what you've heard, a lot of people sort of avoid the difficult stuff. And you might have heard some good stuff and you might have heard some bad stuff, or I like to say difficult stuff. So people often reflect the good stuff back, especially mediators do that all the time. But I tend to go to where the issues are because that is how somebody's going to actually feel listened to. You went to what mattered to me most, and that is really honoring them. So even when you hear something awful, it's okay to say that back or reword it or restate it.
So with or without a mediator?
With or without a mediator.
Go to the heat.
Yep.
Preferences aren't truths, and that was interesting.
Right. A lot of us have strong preferences. We think we know what beauty is. We think we know what cleanliness is. We think we know what logic is. And those are actually preferences for how we want things to go. Not everybody cares so much about logic. Some people care more about maybe creativity. And so there isn't sort of one truth that you can sort of land on, in my opinion, especially when you're in conflict.
And I think of an example, how so often people I know, when they had young children, bedtime was a truth in a lot of people's eyes. The children need to go to bed by 8 o'clock or whatever. Another parent might say, no, I never went to bed at that hour. I went to bed when I was tired. I mean, those are two very different styles,
exactly.
Truths, and
it's a great example. It's a great example. So what happens, say in a mediation, when people are disagreeing like that, I listen to one person, and they get to talk about why that's important to them, and then I listen to the other person, and it's just as true.
So you are non-judgmental, and you're asking both parties to be non-judgmental with themselves, with each other,
right?
Aren't you?
Well, when I'm in a couple situation, yes. And when somebody just reads the book, or if I'm talking to one person and the other person isn't there, one person's learning this skill and the other one might not know it. And so you are actually going into this with the potential of not getting heard yourself, because they aren't learning this, but you're learning it. And so I do spend quite a bit of time teaching people about the gifts to your own self. You're actually doing this because it's for you. Because when someone's being rude to you or mean to you, you aren't really in the mood to give them the gift of getting listened to.
Understandably. We need to give the viewers some resource information. So get out your paper and pencil. And if you want to get a hold of Janet, her email address is janet@mediationunlimited.net.
Exactly.
And your website is mediationunlimited.net. So two easy ones to remember. In just 2 minutes, or do we even have 2 minutes, a short little time left here, when people are ready to make some changes, to come into some more of a resolution state. They've been listened to, they've expressed themselves. What are a couple of the key things that need to happen or should happen?
You know, I find that they happen organically. It isn't like you stop this part and then start a new part.
Okay.
So conflict goes in and out, and so people may come up with some agreements, and then they might get upset again. So it isn't.
So kind of zigzaggy.
It does zigzag, and it does go up and down, and mediators should be comfortable with that. Or if a mediator isn't there and you're just having a discussion, you should expect that things are not going to go in a straight line.
And that's good to know too, isn't it? So people don't get frustrated. Well, thank you so much
My
for coming
pleasure.
down. The half hour just zoomed by for me. I bet it did for you too. And
Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure.
your book comes out soon, and we will be looking forward to it. We'll hold the book up again now so people can get a good look at it. But
Okay.
thank you again, Janet.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
Good. Thank you for being with us. I'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.